Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about Texas and Penn State, the two biggest stories of this past weekend. Both teams that were number 1 and number 2 in the preseason rankings now have fallen unranked and have a lot to figure out. And I don't know if it's figured out by the end of this season, but we'll see how that develops. Obviously, some huge ones coming forward for those two teams. We had some statement wins this past weekend. We had some teams that really put on some shows against some inferior teams, some teams that probably are right on their level, but some massive ones here. And let's start with maybe the most important one of the day, and that was Alabama gets a big time win over Vanderbilt 30-14. This one was interesting because I think you look at the score, and really you look at the score throughout the football game, and you're thinking, okay, Alabama and Vanderbilt played a good football game. They kind of battled back and forth. There was a little bit here, a little bit there, but Alabama was able to make enough plays late in the game. And that was sort of the case. Alabama kind of rolled in this football game. And it's not to say Vanderbilt played terribly or Vanderbilt doesn't deserve respect, because they did a lot of good stuff. There's no doubt about that. And they fought, especially early in this game, got up 7-0. But Alabama had about the worst start you could possibly have. You have Ty Simpson throw a pick on the very first drive. Vanderbilt's able to score. Then they come down, miss a field goal, and you're down 7-0, and you're thinking, we're in a really bad spot going forward. And then it was kind of lights out from there on forward. Now, there was a number of things that happened throughout there that Alabama deserves a lot of respect for. Vandy deserves a lot of respect for. But I think you're in a position where Bama was able to score on all but one drive the rest of the way after the first quarter. They were able to pretty much dominate this game. They did just about everything you wanted them to do. Also, got Jam Miller going. Went for over 100 yards in this game. The first time a running back's done that for Alabama, I think since Jace McClellan in 2023. Shows how crazy important Jalen Milroe was to that team and that offense for the last couple of years. But at the end of the day, this is a team that if they get that run game going, you're probably not holding them under 28, plain and simple. And that defense is starting to play better football. This Vandy offense has some things to figure out. It feels like the SEC teams have started to sort of figure out this offense just a little bit from Tim Beck, but obviously something that we'll see kind of bear itself out the rest of the season. For Diego Pavia, there's a lot of conversation around the talk that he had coming into the game about the kneeling in the pregame. I don't know if he does that every game. I don't know if anyone really does or anyone's confirmed or denied that. At the end of the day, I think it's all fair. I think him talking trash going into the game, all fair. There's football. That's it's part of the fun. Lean into it. That's all well and good. I think the guy yelling him at the end, although I think it's a little bit classless, at the end of the day, I get it. And I think you just got to take your beating and kind of go on your way, because you did talk trash going into this football game. You did say you were going to roll them if you played your football. You didn't play your football, to be totally fair, so I guess you weren't proven wrong in some respect. But at the end of the day, Alabama rolled in this game. They really dominated it pretty much from start to finish. Obviously a little bit of a slow start, but there was never a moment where I didn't feel like Alabama was going to win this game, if I'm being totally honest. And I think they're the real deal. There's still some questions around what this team's going to be week over week, because that's a question that Kalen DeBoer kind of earned himself last year with a lot of inconsistent performances. But at the end of the day, you're in a position where you're going to be a ton more consistent, and it's not necessarily a Jalen Milroe's fault necessarily. Ty Simpson's a better thrower of the football, and he's a much better thrower of the football than a whole lot of people in that conference, a whole lot of people in the country right about now. I saw Joe Klatt make the comment that if he was Ty Manning, we'd probably give him the Heisman right about now, and he's probably right. Ty Simpson's playing ridiculously good football right about now, and I think they're in a position where you move forward, a lot of things to figure out, a lot of things to get a little bit better at, the run game continuing to develop that. But you got 3 weeks coming up that are massively important. You got Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina. If you find a way to win those 3 football games, you're probably finding yourself in Atlanta at the end of the year. You're almost definitely finding yourself in the CFP. If you drop one of those games, then you're walking a little bit of a tightrope, but I still think this team is in a great position moving forward. There is some massive things that they're going to be able to do going forward, especially if that run game continues to develop that they weren't able to do a year ago. They weren't able to do even in the year that they found their way to the playoff and did some incredible things under Nick Saban. This team's going to be more complete. They're going to be able to do a lot of the things that Bama fans have been waiting for quite some time. This was a really incredible win. For Vandy, you made some mistakes that you don't normally make, plain and simple. You get a bye week, and then you get LSU, Missouri, and Texas. Season's far from over. You got a lot of battling to do. There's no doubt about that. I think LSU is going to play a whole lot better. Missouri's playing really good football. I think Texas is going to play better. I can't say a whole lot better, but I think they're going to play better. You got a whole an important month coming up. If you're Vanderbilt, if you find a way to go 2-1 in those games, you feel great. If you find a way to go 1-2, you feel okay. If you go 0-3, then a lot of things are questioned very quickly, and then the Diego Pavia era probably ends on a sour note, but plenty of time to go. Still feel very good about this football team. Fought really hard in this game and did some nice things, just made some mistakes they're not used to making. Miami got again, kind of a dominating win, although they only won by 6 points. They were up by 25 going into the fourth quarter. Then Florida State's able to rip off a couple of touchdowns, and Miami kind of had to get this offense back going, and it didn't really work. And that's something to watch going forward because it has kind of been a theme of their games early on where they'll play incredibly. They'll look like the best team in the country for about a half, maybe 2.5 quarters. And then it'll kind of go into a lull. And sometimes, like this game, you have a 25-point lead. You don't need to force the issue. You kind of just play football until the very end. It's not always going to work out this beautifully for them. It's not always going to work out where Florida State can't make the plays down the stretch or Florida State isn't in the position to get another touchdown on the board. Someone's going to get you, is kind of what I'm trying to say here. If they go stagnant for a quarter and a half, they go stagnant for 2 quarters because they feel like they have the game in hand, you're going to have a problem at some point. It's something that a number of teams have dealt with, and I think something Mario Cristobal is just going to have to get a little bit more used to. Just lean on teams. Be the team that you are all the way for 60 minutes. Now, if you get it by 30 points, by 40 points, then you can kind of lean off the throttle a little bit, no doubt about it, but you gave Florida State just a little bit too much time in this game, and you did enough to get away with the win. Not saying that they played poorly by any means, but you might just want to keep the foot on the gas just a little bit more going forward, because then I think you're winning these games comfortably and you're far and away the number 1 team in the country. As of right now, I feel really confident in you at your best. I don't know how consistently we're going to get your best, I think is the big time question here, especially throughout football games. But Carson Beck's incredibly efficient and accurate. The duo of CJ Daniels and Malachi Toney is becoming one of the very best in the country. The run game continues to be a little bit hit or miss, but something that I do think they're going to continue to get better at, especially with the freaks they have across the offensive line. This is a really good Miami team, plain and simple. There's no doubt about that. I have some questions moving forward, mainly because they're not going to play a team that resembles a Florida State or resembles a Texas or a Georgia or an Alabama or one of these teams they could face the rest of the season in those big moments until those big moments. And that's going to be a big time question. They get Louisville after a bye, then they get a couple tough games, but at the end of the day, from a physicality perspective, it's going to take a massive jump up when or if they get to the CFP, and that's going to be a big time question. But frankly, don't have to worry about that right now. Where now you have to worry about not getting got the rest of the way, because you should beat every team on your schedule the rest of the way, probably by about 14 points. If I'm being totally honest, if you take your foot off the gas, then you're going to have a problem, plain and simple. So a lot of things to figure out for this team. Got to feel really good. If you're Miami, just got to stay locked in, because last year you had a team that looked really good through a couple of weeks and then took their foot off the gas and lost 2 games that they had no business losing at the end of the year. So a lot of things still to go for Miami. You got to feel really confident in this team's ability to make the CFP and maybe their ability to win a national title this year. But for Florida State, it's kind of a confusing conversation, because going into the season, if I were to tell you that they're 3-2 right now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they're 3-2. If I were to tell you they were 3-2 right now, you probably wouldn't be too surprised, right? They lost to Miami. They probably lost to Alabama. That's not how it went down. They beat Alabama. Everyone starts talking about them going to the playoff and winning the ACC and doing all this incredible stuff, flipping it around like that. And then they lose these 2 past games. And you're thinking, okay, now what does it look like? I think they can get to 8-4. And I think that's a win. I think we don't want to lose the perspective of what it was coming into the season and what last season really was for Florida State. If they find a way to get to 8 wins, which I think they will, they get Pitt next week with a young quarterback and a confident offense, so a lot of things to figure out there. But at the end of the day, you win that game, you continue to move forward. This is a good football team, and I think they're doing enough in the year right after a year where everything bottomed out and everything went poorly. And I think you're in a position now where you move forward. Just try to keep the perspective from the preseason, not the one that you had after the Alabama game. I know that's very tough to do, but at the end of the day, an 8-4 season where you lose to a Miami, but you're able to get a win later in the year against a Clemson or against a Louisville or against one of these other good teams in the ACC, you got to feel pretty confident. For Miami, they're rolling. They're going to be really, really hard to stop. The attention turns to Mario Cristobal and the coaches because you just got to not take your foot off the gas. The rest of the way, make sure that you guys are locked in every single weekend because while the ACC isn't quite as strong as some of the other conferences, there's teams that can beat you any given week. So you got to make sure you guys are ready. If they are, you should be able to roll into the ACC title and really roll into the CFP. Texas Tech gets a 35-11 win over Houston, and they keep shutting people up, including myself. I bet on Houston to cover the spread in this one, and Texas Tech didn't even give them a shot. From the opening whistle, that defensive line dominated them from start to finish. And the big-time question around Texas Tech is, can they win a national title? I don't think we have to worry about that right now. Frankly, this is a very good football team, and they're playing really, really high-level football. You have that level of defensive line. You're going to be able to do a lot of special things, plain and simple. As of right now, let's try to handle the Big 12 because I still think there's quite a few hurdles there and quite a few things to figure out. Baron Morton coming out and looking really solid, looking healthy is massive. The run game, being able to take over in this game is awesome. 205 yards from Jacoby Williams and Cameron Dickey, I was trying to remember his name, combined incredible duo that they have. Also, Cameron Dickey had a great receiving touchdown. Really good team. They move on to Kansas State, and then they get at Arizona State. They win those two. This could be an undefeated team at the end of the year. They very well could lose to Arizona State, and then it's a little bit up in the air. At the end of the day, they got to keep rolling. They got to keep their attention locked in. I tend to believe this team will just because they haven't been there in quite some time. Joey McGuire is a very, very aggressive, intense head coach. I think the foot's going to stay on the throttle, but Texas Tech still has a little bit of work to do. A lot of confidence around this football team right now. Probably the team that I would bet on most readily to make the playoff, at least right this second. Them and Miami would probably be setting the pace for me. For Houston, still has plenty of juice moving forward. I think if you get to 8 wins, you're in a really good position moving forward under Willie Fritz. You have a really good quarterback coming in Keyshawn Henderson upcoming in. I think you got to feel confident. You get Oklahoma State next week, then you get both the Arizona schools back-to-back. You got to feel pretty good if you're Houston moving forward. It might not be a Big 12 champion crazy type year, but I think it's going to be a really solid one for the Cougars. Iowa State loses to Cincinnati 38-30. This was a statement game from Cincinnati in a lot of different ways. An incredible game from the Bearcats where they just kind of kept their foot on Iowa State's throat. There was a number of moments where you felt like maybe Iowa State can put it together. They get down by 10, they get down by 8, they'd find a way to cut it to one score, and then Cincinnati hits a big play. And frankly, the refs tried to give him a couple, Iowa State that is, and Cincinnati was able to hit an 83-yard dagger to Caleb Goody to kind of put this one on ice in a lot of respects, but Cincinnati scored on every position in the first half, and then they sort of throttled back, and Iowa State was able to claw their way back into it, so a lot of respect to Iowa State, and I still think is going to be a really tough team moving forward, will be firmly in the mix for the Big 12 moving forward, because if they get healthy in that secondary, which was the massive problem in this game, you're missing guys like Jontez Williams in a big way. And I think if you get those guys back, you're in a position where you can win over Colorado this upcoming weekend. You get a bye, then you got BYU, Arizona State, TCU. So a massive moment for their season. They're still very much in play. For Cincinnati, you got to feel great. And it's a team that I don't think a lot of people were paying attention to going into the season, but Brendan Sorsby is ripping the ball around. A lot of confidence in this run game. Tawi Walker just ran through a guy's face on Saturday. It was incredible to watch what this team did. They get UCF and Oklahoma State the next 2 games, so they should be able to win those games. They will be favored in those games. I can promise you that. And then they get Houston, Arizona, BYU, TCU to finish out the season. This team is still very much alive for Arlington. They're going to have to play this level of football the rest of the way if they want to make it there, but love the Bearcats right now and feel really good about what Brendan Sorsby can do the rest of the season. And then Virginia gets a 30-27 win where, weirdly enough, if you look at the play-by-play, you think, man, Louisville really came back to make this one a game, to force overtime. Really incredible job to claw back into this one. Louisville kind of created that gap for themselves in a lot of respects, especially with a couple of turnovers that were just downright terrible. You had a fumble from Isaac Brown that was taken back to the house. You had maybe the worst pick six I've ever seen, if I'm being totally honest, for Miller Moss, where he keeps himself in the air just to throw it right into the gut of a linebacker. Really tough in a lot of ways. So I think if you're Louisville, you're probably looking back on this one thinking, we should have had it. We make one less mistake in those games. If we give up the ball one less time, then we're in good shape. If Miller Moss's knee gets down a fraction of a second earlier, we're in good shape moving forward. At the end of the day, now you lose this game, and then you get a week off in Miami. I don't know if it's going to be great. Now, I do think this is a dangerous team moving forward. I do think they're a team that can absolutely get back in the relative conversation and kind of trip some people up. But you lose to a team like Virginia that set up really well the rest of the season. You have Miami coming up here pretty soon and a relatively tough schedule after that. Can't feel overly confident in Louisville as of right now. I think they're going to be a good team. I don't know how much of an effect they're going to have on the ACC moving forward. Virginia's very much in this thing. They're 3-0 in the conference because that NC State game earlier in the season wasn't a conference game, weirdly enough. But at the end of the day, they get Washington State this upcoming weekend. That should be a pretty comfortable win. That's out of conference anyway. Now then you get at UNC, at Cal, Wake Forest, at Duke, and Virginia Tech. You're in pretty good shape. You win that game at Duke, you're on your way to Charlotte. There's almost no doubt in my mind. Now, there's definitely some things that can get in your way if Miami goes undefeated and then a Georgia Tech goes undefeated and beats Duke. Then you might have a little bit of a hurdle there, but at the end of the day, this is a very good football team. I think they got to find a way to win the ACC. I hate to say that in a lot of ways because I think they should get some respect if they find a way to get to the ACC title, but I think it's fair to say Virginia, Georgia Tech, Duke, these teams that are kind of right on the cusp of the ACC spot, the other ACC title spot with Miami, they probably got to win that game to get there. Now, Georgia Tech might be the one outlier because if they find a way to beat Georgia, then obviously they would have a little bit more wiggle room. But at the end of the day, I think it's probably going to have to be ACC title or bust for some of those second-tier teams, and that's a tough thing to deal with. But at the end of the day, Virginia's playing really good football. They should move forward with a lot of confidence and feel pretty good. With that Duke game being kind of the epicenter of their season, they find a way to win that one. They are right on their way to Charlotte, and then who knows what happens in 60 minutes against Miami. But an incredible weekend for a lot of those teams. I think Bama might have been the most impressive to me. I kind of knew Miami was this dominant team that had the ability to win. Now, I did pick Florida State because I just thought that game would get a little bit weird, and it almost did, to be fair. But at the end of the day, came away really impressed with Alabama, really impressed with Texas Tech, continue to be really impressed with Texas Tech, but a lot of things still to go for a lot of those teams, a lot of hay to put in the barn, as they would say. But let's take our second break here. When we come back, let's just do a little bit of a whip around. We'll get into some of these games that happened this past weekend, including some crazy comeback from Baylor and Washington. We'll talk about the group of five a little bit, and then we'll touch on the Kyron Lacey story just a little bit at the end. Not a ton, but want to make sure we talk about it before we get out of here. So we'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us.